Hello and welcome to ChangeTalks, interviews that spread ideas. Today I'm talking to Jamie Smart, and Jamie is most well known for the products and trainings he provides in NLP and hypnosis. Over the last 10 years, he has helped people increase their skills in hypnotic language, influence, seduction, and how to get more clients. Now he's moving on and presenting a form of psychology called the 3 Principles. The 3 principles comprise of mind, consciousness, and thought. It was taught by a gentleman called Sydney Banks. This interview goes into Jamie's understanding of the 3 principles, how it's useful for coaches to use, and also goes into how he built up his business and how he advises other coaches looking to build up their client base as well. Anyone who has experienced Jamie knows he provides a lot of value, and this interview is no different. So once again, I hope you enjoy this interview and look forward to your comments.
I'm very well.
Okay, so the first question. You're known for your work in NLP and hypnosis, and you have been out for over a decade or so. But now your focus is on a concept called 3 Principles. So I was wondering whether you can explain what the 3 principles are and how it's different from what you've previously focused on.
Sure. Well, the 3 principles are an understanding of a pre-existing fact about how human beings experience life and how we have an experience of life. And they were discovered by a philosopher, a theosopher called Sydney Banks in the mid-70s. And he had a moment of insightful realization about kind of how life works, about what's behind the scenes of life.
Right.
And he literally in that moment went from being a fairly insecure, nervous, anxious sort of person to being enlightened, for lack of a better word, and in that moment just saw something about how life works. Now, history has had a number of enlightened folk through it. The interesting thing about Banks is, well, a couple of things. One is he was able to pass on what he saw and share it with other people in a way that they could pass on. And the second thing that's interesting about him is we have audio and video of him. And how the 3 principles of the name are mind, consciousness, and thought. And just to give you an idea of what's meant by those words in this context is, you can think of mind as being kind of the energy behind life, the intelligence behind life, the life force if you're talking to a biologist, or energy, formless energy if you're talking to a physicist. David Bohm talked about the implicate order and the explicate order. The implicate order would be mind. Consciousness, thought is our ability to create form. So, Aaron, if I say to you, think of a purple giraffe, you can imagine that. Thought is the ability to create that form in your mind.
Right.
So I think of thought as being kind of the pixels of our perception. And so here's a way I like to talk about it is like, if you're asleep and dreaming, and you're walking through a landscape or in a house or you're interacting with other people, everything in the dream is created from thought. It's created in your mind. It's mind made, and what it's made of, quote unquote, is thought.
Yes, absolutely.
And those same processes are used to create our waking experience of reality. Whether we're daydreaming or whether we're looking around a room or whatever we're doing, what I call the pixels of perception are creating our experience of that. And so that's what we're referring to by thought.
Okay.
And then consciousness is what gives us an experience of that.
So you have the thought first, and then you have the consciousness as a result of that thought. Is that right?
Well, there's not really a sequence. These 3 principles, mind, consciousness, and thought, they have no form. They're formless principles. They're they're the ability to, and so they work as a unity, you could say. So we think our way through life. We're having a psychological experience of reality. There's no, I don't really think of it in terms of sequence, because when you're when you're daydreaming, you're not, you know, from a synaptic perspective, there's probably a sequence, but in terms of your experience of it, it happens right now in the moment. So I don't really think of sequence in that sense. Go ahead.
As you were learning the three principles, did you notice big differences between the kind of understanding you had when you were really into NLP and hypnosis?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is looking at something that's pre-existing. So, by principles, you take something like gravity. Gravity's a principle. Gravity exists whether you believe in it or not. It works whatever you think of it. It's something that's there before you and I. You know, gravity was here before you and I were, and gravity is a truth, you could say. It's something about the world that, and funnily enough, while our attempts to explain it are always subject to revision, the fact of gravity is always there. Well, it's the same with these principles. What we're pointing to with these principles is a fact behind our experience of life. When I first heard it, I was like, well, hang on a second. Don't talk to me about facts. Don't talk to me about truth, because what the thinker thinks the prover proves. People can believe anything. But then someone pointed out to me, he said, look, people can believe anything, but the fact that people can believe, the fact that people think, that's a fact. And I couldn't argue with that. I was like, yep, that sure is. That's a fact. And the fact that people are alive, that's a fact. And the fact that people are conscious in some way, that they have, you know, when we're asleep and dreaming, we're conscious of what we're dreaming. We may not remember it when we wake up, but we're conscious of it at the time. When we're awake, we're aware of what we're aware of. Whether we're daydreaming or thinking about something else, we're conscious of what we're thinking of.
Okay.
So these three things, these are pre-existing. They're before the fact. They're before, you know, they're here before you and I, Aaron. So they're nothing to do with what we're doing with our thinking, or how we're using our thinking, or even what we're thinking about. They're what's creating our experience of life, moment to moment. And so the reason that's how that differs from NLP or hypnosis or anything like that is it's looking at an understanding of how life works rather than something to be doing, rather than looking for an intervention. And the reason that's valuable is because it turns out, for reasons we'll probably get into later in the interview, it turns out that when you get what I'm calling an insightful understanding of how life works, when you see it for yourself from the inside out, how life works, life improves. You discover that you're more resilient than you thought, that you're capable of more than you thought, that you can experience a lot of the stuff that people strive to experience just as a natural byproduct of being alive. So that's why, if someone's going, well, yeah, so what? There are these three principles, so what? Why is that useful, or how is that useful? How it's useful is, as you begin to see it for yourself, it starts showing up in all kinds of powerful ways. Okay,
so in your talking about insightful understanding, you talk a little bit about that in your book that you released, Effortless Evolution. So you have this insightful understanding, but doesn't there have to be at some point need to be action? You know, if someone hates their job in a way, and they have an insightful understanding of that, you know, he's still in the job. So doesn't he have to at some point strive to create a better environment, i.e., he gets a better job, or he starts his own business, or something like that?
Oh, well, that's a terrific question, Aaron, and it inherent in that question is one of the fundamental superstitions about the world that is currently accepted as fact, and that we innocently are kind of fooled into thinking is true by the way that our perception operates. So what I heard you say was, if someone's in a job and they hate their job, they can get all the insightful understanding they like, but sooner or later, if they want their life to improve, don't they need to change their job or start their own business or something? So what has to be true for that question to make sense is the idea that it's the job that's causing their unpleasant experience.
Right, yeah.
That would be true if we lived in an outside-in world, in a world where we walk around in our circumstances and where our feelings, where our happy feelings are caused by our circumstances and our unpleasant feelings are caused by our circumstances. And it sure looks like that a lot of the time. But that's not how it works. It only works one way. And how it works is that our experience of life is created from the inside out. You know, there are two fundamental mistakes that human beings make, and that I make pretty much on a daily basis. And there are two flavors of the same mistake, really. The first mistake that people make is we tend to mistakenly attribute our beautiful feelings, our feelings of peace and well-being and inner security and clarity and all that sort of stuff. We tend to mistakenly attribute those to our circumstances.
Right.
When in fact they're a signal telling us that our thinking is relatively clear, that our thinking is relatively on track, that our thinking is relatively undistorted in those moments. So when we're feeling peaceful, when we're feeling joyful, when we're feeling loving and connected, that's our system, if you like, signaling to us that our thinking is relatively trustworthy.
Right.
But we tend to attribute those feelings to our circumstances. That's the first mistake that people make. The second mistake that people make is, me included, did it today, is to mistakenly attribute our unpleasant feelings, our feelings of agitation and distress, to our circumstances, when those feelings are in fact a signal telling us that our thinking is not to be trusted in those moments, that it's gone a little toxic, that it's distorted. And so to answer your question about, what about action, what I guarantee you is when people see something more clearly, they take relevant action. Always. Because if you think about it, Aaron, we always take action in line with our understanding of life. So if a person's understanding of life is that, let's imagine that a person's understanding of life is that their job is causing their feelings of unhappiness or misery or hatred or whatever it is if they hate the job. But let's say that, make matters worse, that person also feels that the only reason they're doing that job is because that's the money that they get paid gives them the security they